That way it kind of breaks the barrier.
True.
What I wanted to say to you, in which this is being recorded,
True.
whenever I come from Antioch, Illinois,
Yeah.
they had done already discovered that I had a learning disability.
LD?
Huh?
LD, learning disability.
And it was something, I guess, in the South that they never had been introduced to yet.
No.
They was that far behind.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, whenever we moved down here, because of those factors, with the educational skills down here being lax, because of the abusiveness that I was going through with my father, the whole family, I picked up on traits of learning differently than most other children.
Okay.
I knew that my arithmetic was good. You know, real good.
Sure.
Because back then you had to learn, you had to memorize.
Numbers.
You had to memorize 1 all the way to 9 towards your times table.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, if you got in trouble, a lot of times that's what they done, was make you repeat a sentence again and again and again 100 times.
Yeah.
Until you finally
sunk in.
6 pages or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But I picked up on a technique of learning pertaining to picture imagery.
Okay.
And I learned a great deal in the library off of the National Geographics.
Okay.
Because in just about every column that they pursued, they usually always had one or more pictures to go along with the column.
Sure. Sure, with the article.
With the article.
Yeah.
And I picked up on that. I said, man, this is the way right here to teach somebody. If you're going to teach them, because it brings interest to the story, makes it more interesting.
Right. It's just not words.
And it's something that you can possibly relate to, even though it may be in another country, it may be talking about a different subject. It was so broad that was basically my only method of teaching myself in the educational arena, because people down here, if you didn't catch on just like that,
they're on to the next person.
By the age of 2 or 3, they just voided you and went on to the next person that they thought that they could get something out of.
They passed people for.
Well, they didn't have no idea that we was being abused. They didn't have no idea that we was. They knew we was on a farm trying to farm, and that was one reason why the school system down here was lenient towards not pressing it too hard on the children. But they had no idea that sometimes I'd work on a tractor, plowing or disking or braking or doing whatever till sometimes 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night.
Right.
Go home, have to do homework, take a shower, and be lucky to get 3 or 4 hours sleep and wake back up and get on the bus and do it all over again. And again, and again, and again, and again.
And the school didn't care about that.
School didn't care about that.
No. That didn't even pretend.
But that has an effect on a learning atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
Just like it has an effect on a learning atmosphere if you're around somebody that's freaking barbaric, and every time you misspell a word more than twice, you got the hell knocked out of you, and you got knocked plumb out of the chair onto the kitchen, and then he picked you back up by the hair of the head and set you down. I couldn't tell you the amount of times that I would sit there just shaking, just literally just terrorized, shaking and crying. I couldn't even stay focused on the words.
Right.
And this freaking guy sitting there hammering. That was the only thing he knew, as being a World War II drill sergeant, was hammer, in him. Make him do it. Drive him.
I'll break him. Yeah.
Well,
I like that mentality.
Well, what he was doing was making it worse.
Yeah.
And he was too stupid to understand that.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
And it may work with certain people, that technique towards push.
Yeah.
But some people rebel.
Well, some people don't take
A matter of fact, most people will rebel. And whatever point that you're trying to make with me, I'll be damn come high water if I'm going to do it now.
That's where all those comments.
Because you're trying to force it down my freaking throat.
Fragging the sergeant. It's where they always talked about fragging the sergeant because they couldn't take it no more.
Well, you said something yesterday that kind of struck a nerve with me. Not in a bad way, but you said something about the baker?
Vickers doesn't?
No. You used the terminology that I was blaming the baker or something like that.
Oh, for the bread.
What did that mean?
Oh, you're blaming, it's like Obama, okay? We were all blaming Obama for this, that, and whatever, but everybody knows. And if they're too thin-minded to understand that he was the mop-up boy for Clinton.
Right.
Clinton got us into this shit, and hey, what the fuck was the
with
new
NAFTA?
president?
NAFTA.
All of it. Getting us over to Iraq, having so many billions going into the national debt.
See,
they started it, but Obama came in after, and he had to mop it up.
Well, I'm going to tell you something else that hurt us.
Sure.
I don't know. Do you remember Sam Walton by chance? Some of the
Samuel
commercials.
Walton, the originator of Walmart.
That's right. Do you remember some of those commercials that he made?
Sure.
What was their main theme?
Guaranteed satisfaction.
That was part of their theme, but their theme was Made in America.
Oh yeah, and most
Made in America.
In America, and they took that off.
Well, they did whenever the old man died.
Yeah.
The kids got a hold of the enterprise, and they changed everything around. And that's whenever they started buying all kinds of stuff from China and all these other different countries. And basically, Walmart was the turning point in the early 90s.
They were now the new dollar store. They were going to make a big dent in them dollar stores, because all them dollar stores, they sell nothing but China shit, Korean, Malaysian, all that stuff.
Right. Well, now, since Amazon's come onto the picture, now Amazon is beating Walmart in sales.
Oh yeah, of course. That's how it's going to be.
Until
they
eventually,
got marketing companies out there doing research. Their research tells them, you know what? Let's go at it this way.
Right.
Because it worked this way last year and the year before and the year before that. That company, they did this and they made their numbers increase by X amount. Let's try it. If it don't
well,
work,
you know what China's doing now?
Huh.
They're going over everybody's head. And they're going to places like India and places like Africa, and they're trying to do trade-off deals now.
Oh, yeah.
Bargaining.
Yeah.
They no longer want to deal with the big guys. They want to get a bunch of little guys now together.
Well, yeah.
Towards selling and making all their
Make that money back. The ones that don't want to tariff us.
Exactly.
Yeah. And don't want to have to pay the American tax dollar.
But the reason why that I brought this up is because I use those same techniques today in whatever that I'm wanting to talk about. In other words, I'm going to just use this ashtray as an illustration.
Sure.
If I was in front of a group of people and I was wanting to talk to them about smoking, I'd probably have an ashtray.
Sure. Or
standing there, or a pack of cigarettes, or a cigar, or something somewhere around the tobacco industry. That way, I could maybe be effective towards getting my message across to maybe somebody a little more so than the other one. Because I've always been told as a teacher, an instructor, that if you can get a third of your class to take in what you're trying to teach them,
you've done good.
You've done good.
No shit.
Especially in today's society, because their minds is constantly wandering. They've been up all night playing a freaking video game, and they're still thinking about that video game. They're not thinking about what this teacher's trying to teach them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I had good engaging teachers. They were engaging to the point where, hey, you ain't sleeping in my class. Stand up. Take that chair and put it in the corner over there, and you stand up during class. If you think you're gonna sleep in my class, this is what you're gonna have. And he engaged, and he confronted and challenged, and there's a lot of times he got confronted quite a few times with
negativity
and hostileness.
Right.
And he still walked away with it happy because the student got suspended, and that's all there was to it. Right's right and wrong is wrong. We're there to learn, not to fucking sleep.
Well, these teachers up here, whenever I was going to Sharon School, not so much Westview, but Sharon School, they would actually promote it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, once they identified that you had some sort of learning disorder, or you just wasn't capable or up to date with the rest of the kids,
or you.
They didn't want to deal with it. No, wasn't just me. There was like 3 or 4 in my class alone that was similar to me, to where come classroom, we would basically sleep it off.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And the teachers would promote that.
Yeah. Well, because at that time, no matter what, the farmer ran this country.
And still do to a certain degree.
And the farmer and their family were treasured items. But now, they're shit. You know, they might go up and down the roads in tractors at 9, 10 years old, but that don't mean that it's right.
Well,
that's crazy.
I'm glad that I've become old enough and wise enough, and I'm still strong enough that I can tell my story.
Yeah.
And that I can help to enlighten people like my son towards telling him these are the things that occurred. And it's not that I'm trying to step on nobody's grave pertaining to your grandpa, but these are the things that your father had to deal with pertaining to your grandfather.
How much of it did he remember about your grandfather?
All of it.
All of it. Did he remember?
All of it. He was his idol. My father was my son's idol.
Oh, God.
Anything he done or however that he done it, he looked up to him like he was a king. Like he was to be worshipped. And believe it, and believe it or not.
Even when he beat his children. Or that was never
he done already slowed down.
Did he know about that?
He knew about it from talk, but he never actually seen it that much.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And his grandfather actually took on a different level of tolerance at that time, to where he actually become a pretty decent teacher towards teaching him how to work on cars, teaching him how to take out his own spark plugs, teaching him how to change oil, teach him how to take off a fender, teach him how to do stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And believe it or not, at that time, I can see now why my son idolizes his grandfather.
Yeah, you don't know anything about how he actually was.
He didn't know the brutality of it.
No, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. But at the same time, I didn't like the fact that I'd done something to my father's headstone that my son sworn off that he was going to go on a crusade after I died towards going up there at Alamo Baptist Church and having it erased or taken off. He said even if he had to grab a hold of it with a daggum truck and rip it out of the ground, he was not going to tolerate anybody writing the word lithium on the bottom part of his grandpa's tombstone. Because in 1983, it was my biological father that went to Bolivar, Tennessee, and talked to the doctors and convinced them that my son needs to be on lithium. Persuaded them that my son needed to be on lithium. They had no earthly idea up there in Bolivar that they was dealing with a freaking half-minded person. A person that just...
They didn't know anything about bipolar at all.
They didn't know nothing about bipolar, and they didn't know nothing about his background towards what that he had went through, other than the fact that he was in the military.
Yeah.
They didn't know about all that brutality that went on in the family.
No, but if they talk to you, you can fill them in.
Oh, I did to some degree, but I don't think that they believed it.
No. A lot of times they don't. And down here in the South, they just turn a blind eye.
It's like, well, he's just using...
You know what? My mother and father, they went through this. They went through that. You know what?
And they'll use this technique. Well, they're just using that for a scapegoat. Attention or whatever.
Yeah.
You know. But the bottom line is this. I never should have went, or had to have went, to a mental institution after the car rolled over on top of me and my father tried to kill me. No. And I was going to Kenton, Tennessee to get some help. I never should have gotten marked that way or scarred that way.
Your father should have been sent to a mental institution.
Yes.
After he tried to kill you.
Yes. Or he should have just went to jail, period, for attempted murder.
He was probably close to the sheriff or whoever.
Damian Cross, the mayor down there in Kenton that we was kin to on our mother's side.
Yeah.
Everybody knows everybody around here.
They turned a blind eye.
And guess how they done World War II veterans back then?
Oh, shitty.
No, not the World War II veterans.
No.
They didn't get treated like the Koreans and the Vietnams. No, they was looked up to. They was admired. Yes.
It's good.
Because they won the war.
Yeah.
But if you really get to look at it, did you know that that's the only war that America's ever won?
Yeah.
Did you know it?
Yeah, that's only because
every other exchange that we've been involved in, we either had to leave like we did with Afghanistan.
Took our ass and
tuck tail and run. So yeah, everybody around here admired my dad, and that was one reason why my mother said what she said whenever we was contemplating towards
Is that still on your
killing
dad's
him,
headstone?
assassinating him in the middle of the night. She would always say, "Yeah, I know it's the right thing to do, but the way that they think about him around here, um, they won't never see it that way. We'll have to wind up being moving or being persecuted on account of it."
Oh yeah.
Just like whenever my uncle, which was my mother's brother, got caught with a brand new stinking Lincoln in Kenton, Tennessee, playing pool with his $5,000 pool stick because he was always one of these showmanships guy, wearing nice boots, nice clothes, big Stetson hat.
He was a dapper.
Yeah, one of those cops over in Kenton drove by, and they just had a funny feeling, I guess, to check the license on the car, and the license didn't match the car.
Yeah.
And they got to digging a little deeper, and they went in there and got him, and found out that he had extended warrants on him up in Chicago because of working with the mob of stealing cars.
Yeah. And all habits die hard, and if he did the job out there of that, he'd be stacking cars down here.
He was.
Sure.
He had about 15 of them over at Billy Heilman's house over there in
a barn somewhere.
In a barn somewhere.
Yeah. Actually, I think.
In other words,
that's what happened with my.
In other words, they would pull the car. The car would get, the car would hit the hotline.
Sure.
But then after about 6 months, if they can't find the car, it kind of gets shoved back to the back a little bit.
Yeah.
It's no longer out in plain view.
It's no longer on the hot list.
No longer on the hot list.
Yeah.
And he knew that, so he was using Billy Heilman to
sit on him.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, he kept a stash spot.
Billy Heilman's house got caught on fire because he wound up going to jail. And the next thing he knows, somebody in Kenton wound up with a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And we know where it come from. And we know why the house got burnt.
Yep.
But proving it's another thing.
Well, I think
in other words,
burning the house down was just getting rid of the evidence.
Oh, it was. But whenever you take a robber and he robs from the robber, how do you go with that? I mean, it was already blood money to begin with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he knew it. And the guy that I'm talking about, which I'm not going to mention his name, but he knew it. He knew what was going on. So did my grandmother. But this is the point that I'm trying to make about these little towns around here.
Yeah.
My grandmother said, from this moment on, we'll never be looked upon the same. And you know what?
True.
She was right.
Very true.
And that event happened probably, I'm going to say...
50 years ago?
No, it wasn't that long. My brother died in 76. I'm going to say that probably happened in the early 80s, somewhere around 70, 78 or 79.
About 32 years.
And that, I think that had a profound effect upon, in 1983, whenever I went to Kenton, Tennessee, towards seeking help. Instead of getting help, I actually got branded because it had something to do with what went on about 4 or 5 years ago that was still on everybody's mind over there in Kenton, Tennessee, with it being a little one-horse community.
Is that one thing with Holly Bobo?
Well, it's just like, you're being punished because of your kin.
Oh, yeah.
Your relations.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if he was a no good for nothing, sorry, you know what? Ain't you kin to him? Ain't you his first cousin? Wasn't he your uncle? Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. And they start automatically compartmentalizing in their minds. They're like, they think that they're psychiatrists, Well, if your uncle was a freaking thief, I guess you probably are too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what they say, guilty loves. Misery loves company, and the thieves they steal amongst themselves.
But I was just a kid. I was just a teenager when all that went on. You know what I'm saying? But I still got put in the rough because of what somebody else had done. Because my mother and all the Jordans actually was raised up in Kenton, Tennessee.
Yeah.
But my grandmother said, she said, from this day on, they'll never look upon us the same.
No.
And she was right. They degraded us.
Uh-huh.
They judged us. They condemned us. They looked down upon us like we had a part of that.
Children, products of the parents.
That like we had a product, like we had a part of that.
What's that phrase?
But what I'm saying is that's how biased and judgmental that they are around here.
The sons of the father, the sons of the father will suffer the guilt of the will suffer the guilt of the family.
In other words, the apple don't fall far from the tree. Now,
That's the truth. That's the truth.
That's the way they. That's the way they look at it.
That's the analogy.
That's the way they look at it.
That's the way they look at it.
Yeah. In other words, if your father was a drunk, odds are you're going to be a drunk.
Yeah.
If your mother was a whore, odds are you're probably going to be a whore.
Every daughter in that family is going to be a whore.
Right. But then on the other hand, the way they look at it, well, if your father was a judge, you're probably going to be blessed towards maybe even becoming a lawyer or a judge.
Uh-huh.
Or if your mother was a teacher, maybe your daughter's going to become a teacher. You see what I'm saying? In other words, they got this mentality that birds of a feather flock together.
It's a tiny mentality, tiny brains.
They've got this mentality that birds of a feather flock together, and they don't realize that every now and then that mentality ain't worth a you know what.
Yeah, it ain't. Because I ain't nothing like how my family is.
Because my brother and I, David, before he died, we would always use my father as an example.
Yeah.
For towards not what to be, but towards what not to be.
Yeah, exactly.
In other words, we learned from him
Sure.
of the things towards what not to be like.
What not to do.
What not to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying to be a driver, make you do this. You know, I seen him take his own mother and cram food down her mouth before they wound up taking her to the nursing home because she didn't want to eat asparagus, or she didn't want to eat this, or she didn't want to eat that. And she was, man, you talking about a woman that was dedicated with the Bible. She's the woman that I got the picture of.
Yeah.
But whenever I seen him grab her up by the throat,
no, that's not good,
and sling her up against the wall and start screaming and hollering, "You're Bible crazy, you're Bible crazy, you're Bible crazy."
Yeah. This ain't got nothing to do with it. Eat the sustenance. What do you want? Beer? What do you want? Wine? Bread?
But the spirit within my father
Yeah.
could not control his body to the fact that he was taking his brutality not only out on his children, not only out on his wife, but out on his own mother.
Out on his loved ones.
What's the old saying? The closer the kin, the deeper in.
Yeah.
That just ain't talking about sexual.
Oh, no. No, that talks about snuffing them out, too. And
Well, I mean, I was good enough to sign a note for my dad whenever I wound up getting my little bit of settlement after falling off that 4-story building in 81. I went down there at Kenton, and I had a gut feeling that I was going to get beat, and sure enough, I did. But I was the co-signer of a $3,000 note. Well, come when time for the note to come due, he didn't have the money.
Hell no.
Well, guess who the banker was knocking on whose door?
No.
Knocking on my door.
Yep.
So I had to cough up the $3,000
Yeah.
just to satisfy them and keep them off of my back.
Yeah, exactly.
Then the following next year, he decides to file bankruptcy because he realized his world had concaved around him because of his actions, how he was treating not only his family, but how he treat,
How he was self-destructing.
He was basically in a self-destructive mood.
Yeah.
And whenever he filed bankruptcy, I got a certified letter from the lawyer's office where he declared bankruptcy on his own son.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself,
he felt that he owed you.
I'm thinking to myself, wow, that kind of speaks volumes about
this person. Yeah.
About this person. In other words, he couldn't have kept that on a professional, personal level. He had to go with it full blown.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, that's pretty solid.
When you go to the lawyer's
that's
office
pretty
to file
rotten.
bankruptcy, they always ask you to list all your debts.
And I was one of the indebtedners. I was one of the indebtedners.
He felt it. You know what? I'm going to include.
Maybe he was trying to clear his conscience.
Maybe he was just trying to clear his agenda for having to make payments to somebody. That was an excuse to get out of him. Because now they can't be harassing you for it. Because other than that,
I wasn't the only one that he made void promises to.
Well, I'm sure.
I mean, he made void promises with cows and calves, and I was going to get this part of the ground over here, this 5 acres. Anything we get off that property over there, it's going to be yours come the fall. And he done David the same way.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I just can't do it right now. I just can't sacrifice this money right now. I'll make it up to you.
Yeah.
He
They
made
paint
it up.
that pretty picture, don't they?
Oh well, they're squirming, they're worming, they're crawfishing, man. They're trying to get out of this.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, they're doing the side.
They're
stuff,
manipulative. They're manipulative.
Yeah, they're just manipulative. What do we call it?
Conning.
No.
Being a con.
No, you con man.
Con man.
There was another term for it. A shyster. Shyster.
Nothing but a shyster.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one reason why the community took such of a disliking to me, especially when all of a sudden
How close
one of Bobby's boys is out here preaching.
God.
He's out here issuing out material and going to churches and putting out all these pamphlets underneath people's windshield wipers. This is Bobby Jackson's son?
He's trying to con somebody.
Huh?
He's trying to con somebody.
Well, they thought I was...
They just thought that right off the bat.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately. Matter of fact, that was one of the things that they accused me of.
He's got to be a shyster, a con man, or something.
You got it.
There's got to be something behind it.
Right.
They couldn't take the message for what it was.
Nope.
No.
A matter of fact, I got accused of doing it for celebrity purposes.
Yeah.
He's doing this just for celebrity purposes. Of course, this was way before the internet ever come out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Before 1985.
Well, this was in this was in 90. It was about the time that the internet was coming out.
Yeah, okay.
But it hadn't got predominant like it is now.
Yeah, not like they were sending out the discs for AOL.
Basically, the only people that had internet back then was the business people.
Sure. Ones that could afford a computer.
The ones that could afford it at home, and the ones that had the little big telephone in their vehicle that they had to tote around because people didn't have cellular phones back then. It's all business-minded folks.
Business phone.
But they took their analogy off of what they knew about me
Sure, they stereotyped
and my family, and they stereotyped me, and they automatically compartmentalized me towards saying, well, if his father was this, he must be that.
Who knows what they thought?
So I had the whole thing against me.
Sure.
Everything from my uncle to my mother not being dedicated towards going to church, towards them not understanding what type of abusive relationship that we was all going through as children and her. I had a lot of things stacked up against me. Didn't have proper education. Didn't get no graduate towards becoming a diploma.
Yeah.
Didn't even get a GED. I mean, I had lots and lots of things against me that lots and lots of people put you in a category of being a loser. You ain't got education, you're a loser. You like to drink, you're a loser. You like to smoke up a little bit and get high, you're a loser. Who was your father? You're a loser. You believe in what? You're a loser.
Yeah. And they made sure of it.
Yes, sir.
And they reinforced it with touching this base with that one and that one and this one and this one and making sure that loser didn't get no fair shake.
He wasn't going to get no breaks.
No.
We're not doing nothing for him. We didn't do nothing for his father, and we're not doing nothing for him. See, what I really think what happened, and you brought this up before.
Yeah.
In the early 1900s, Lim's store.
Yeah.
My great-grandfather purchased a piece of property from Mr. Ridgway.
Sure.
Bought a store. And become a predominant figure in the area. Of course, at that time, there probably... I say there wasn't. I mean, we seen them.
Wasn't that many stores.
Wasn't that many stores, but what I'm talking about, there was still a lot of people in this area.
Sure.
Just like those pictures. Who'd you say that made that pamphlet, the church pamphlet? Was it Tiny Sue?
That was my Aunt Tiny Sue. Yeah.
Aunt Tiny Sue?
Yeah.
That was her work.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
That was her and my mother's collaboration.
pertaining to different things and different events and
times and places and who was around at that time.
putting it all together as a package. And then whenever she died, it was laying around here and you was good enough to let me have it.
Yeah.
Well, at that time, my grandfather was looked upon as being a predominant figure. Matter of fact, they own lots of ground in the Obion County area. They own lots of ground in the Weakley County area. And his wife was a midwife that went out here and helped other wives bring children. He was not only selling rabbits and chickens, but he was selling Coca-Colas, and he was also selling aspirins and other types of medications, as well as black powder. And I mean, he was a do-all store back then.
Yeah. I mean, you had to supply to what the customers were looking
for.
A
matter of fact, they thought enough of him that they hired him towards being a judge, a judiator, towards going around. And that's whenever they started hanging people. Okay. The majority of them was black, but some of them was white too. Yeah. Some of your low-life, no-good-for-nothing people. And then the 1929 Depression hit.
Yeah.
Well, guess what my great-grandfather done? He started toting people. Started putting them on credit.
Okay.
Well, they basically...
They started carrying them.
Well, basically, they took him all the way down.
Yeah.
He wound up having to sell this piece of property and sell this piece of property and sell this and do that. And the next thing you know, after he took somebody in towards raising them, because I've studied all of it. I looked at the courthouse and looked at all of it. Basically, he died as a pauper.
Yeah.
And, of course, at that time was whenever things was evolving, because that was in 1929 was whenever the Great Depression hit.
Right.
Okay. World War II hadn't happened yet.
Right.
But they claim, historically speaking, that everything changed from the judicial system side, as far as courts, how they pursued courts pertaining to juries and judges. Everything changed after World War I.
I agree.
Everything changed.
It had to.
Because everything before World War I, it was brutal.
Yeah, you know why?
Probably because of the Europeans.
Overpopulation.
Probably because of the Europeans.
No, overpopulation.
I'm telling you that
locally here.
If you got caught stealing somebody's horse, you know what you got?
You got hung.
If a black boy got to mess around with a white girl, you know what you got?
You got hung. You got hung.
They was brutal back then.
No.
Yes, they was.
It was pretty fair.
They was brutal back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
they had barbaric.
They needed to be.
They had barbaric ways
after the Great Depression. All that.
No, I'm talking about stuff that was going on before the Great Depression.
Okay.
They was brutal and barbaric. I'm telling you, after the 1929 Depression hit, after World War I, things changed.
They had to.
People had a different concept about how we was going to handle ourselves, and they already went through the Great Spanish Flu episode. Whenever I think it killed, I don't know how many millions of people.
Lots.
It was a lot. And they'd already had several things that had happened to them by this time, and their whole concept towards what we was going to do and how we was going to do it changed.
That was back when the polio vaccine came out too.
Well, guess what? The very same people that was idolizing my great-grandfather for going around hanging people, they turned on him.
Sure.
Look what a no good for nothing son of a you know what you are. You went around hanging people and doing this and doing. He was just doing what he was told to do.
That's right.
He was staying within the guidelines of the law. It was the state of Tennessee that was paying for him to do what he was doing.
Just like the soldier over there is paid to kill those people.
That's it.
Yeah, he got his orders. I had mine.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then my son and I, this morning, we got talking about the Civil War a little bit. I said, well, just think about this. If you was from the South, and the South already knew that the North had made a predominant stance in productivity by having the black man as a slave, and then all of a sudden, you got all these northern armies that's coming down here that's taking your property, burning your houses, killing your chickens, taking your cows, raping your wives and daughters, and basically moving into the territory towards taking you over. I said, would you not have been like the Southern people toward wanting to fight back?
Right.
See, the way they looked at it like, well, they was fixing to get a taste of that prosperity too.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden you jerked the biscuit out of our mouths.
Yeah.
All our dreams and all our ideals that we had, that we was going to follow in y'all's footsteps. Now you're telling me that we can't do it? We can't have our own slaves?
Yeah, the education is 10 years behind.
At least.
At that time.
At least.
At that time, they were about 25 years behind in education and everything else at that time.
Well, you know why? Because
they were happy in their little
nut. Not so much happy.
Bubble.
Not so much happy, but if you keep them blind, keep them ignorant, and keep them barefooted in the winter, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We can control these people.
Oh, yeah.
We can dominate these people.
Sure. And
that's what the North was basically doing. They was controlling the South because they was keeping them under their thumb. You know, you had the carpetbaggers that come down here, wanted to take advantage of the cheap labor of the Southern force and everything.
Yep.
They were smarter up there. You know why they were smarter? Because they was educated.
Sure. Made a big difference.
They was educated.
Yeah.
And I asked my son, I said, why did the North win the war? Or why, better yet, why did the South lose the war? And he come up with some kind of excuse, this and that. I said, nope. I said, they lost the war because they didn't have proper funds.
Yep.
They had the wheel, but they didn't have money to buy the gunpowder and buy the bullets.
Yeah.
They run out of money.
Yep.
Well, whenever you're dealing with a David and Goliath, the South was the David.
Sure.
And the North was the Goliath.
Yeah.
Whenever you're dealing with a David and Goliath, you really didn't have much of a chance, did you?
No. These Southern folk, they're great. I mean, they put up a hell of a fight. They did a lot of campaigning to a certain point, but when they seen that things were not going their way, they just started heading off in other state directions and heading toward the West, like everybody else proceeded before them, from the West, the Great West. And they just started heading west, making crimes all across the way there. And that's where those, what was it? And it was a bunch of Southern boys. So-and-so's Riders. It was one
Night Riders?
Yeah, there was a commander. No, not the Night Riders, but there was a commander.
Over in Missouri?
And he came...
That had...
He took all these Southern boys, and they would go from town to town to town to town and raid.
Guerrilla warfare.
Oh, yeah, they did that.
Guerrilla warfare. Well, see, I've looked at that, too, pertaining to my cousin up there in Missouri.
Okay.
Jesse James.
Yeah.
And his brother Frank. Basically, it was the syndicate that got them killed.
Sure.
And the reason why is because the railroad was going to come down to there, and they wanted their property. Well, they didn't want to sell.
Right.
Well, you know what they done? They raided the house. And they wound up killing, I think, either their mother or their sister or something like that. Filled it full of a bunch of holes.
That caused crazy hating.
That caused crazy hating. But you keep in mind, during the time that they was raising up as children into their teenage years, they was raised up around all this violence.
Yeah.
Shooting and killing in the streets and robbing banks and stagecoaches and all kinds of freaking barbaric behavior that was going on back then. So naturally, they picked up that same mentality.
Sure.
Okay?
That was a part of survival for them.
And guess what? They got good at it.
Yeah, they did.
And
they took it all the way to Utah.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they not only got good at it, but they got to liking it. They claim that if an animal ever gets to taste of blood, it's hard to break them.
So much, yeah.
It's hard to break them. It don't matter if it's a dog. It don't matter if it's a coyote. That if it ever gets to taste of blood, it does something to the...
You get that anxiety.
It does something to the mind mentality.
It creates them endorphins. And you get into a gunfight or something like that, you got them endorphins going.
Sure.
And then, hell, man, I get to rape the broads and I get to do this.
It's almost like an orgasm.
Yeah, well, it's almost like a mental fix.
It's like an orgasm, isn't it? It's like an orgasm. And they claim it Jeffrey Dahmer and all those other murders. That's the reason why that they turned out to be the way that they was, because they got a rush out of it.
They got off it.
They got off on it.
Yep. Crazy. All right, buddy, get out of here.
Well, let me finish my story about Jesse James.
My bad.
Jesse James, he wanted to change after he got older, got to feeling arthritis, bursitis.
Sure.
He actually went to New Johnsonville, crossed the river. Of course, at that time it was just Johnsonville,
Right.
because TVA hadn't flooded that area over there yet. And he settled down, him and his wife, and she wound up having two children, twins.
Okay.
Well, they both died.
Ooh.
After that, he went somewhere up in Nashville and robbed a facility up there. I guess it was strictly out of a need towards wanting to do that. And after he got through doing that was whenever they moved back to Missouri, and that's whenever he took the bullet in behind his back, pertaining to his best friend, basically turning him
in
for a Judas.
Yeah.
A Judas Iscariot. You know what I'm saying? But they tried. Or he tried.
He tried to make a good go of it.
He tried to be a farmer. He tried to turn a new leaf. He was going to put all that behind him.
Yeah. And the two kids dying, that was just a bad omen.
Did you know that they moved them kids back about 10 years ago? They dug them up and they moved them to the family plot over there in Liberty, Missouri.
I believe it.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of deep family. There's a lot of...
Oh, yeah.
I'm kin to them.
Yeah.
My great-grandfather on my mother's side was a James.
There's a...
E.W. James, that grocery store in Union City.
Yeah, probably.
The guy that owned that originally
yeah.
was my grandmother's first cousin.
Okay, the probably where they dug the kids up at. I understand that area is under development now, and it's supposed to be the Jesse James. It's going to be named after that. It's Sleepy Hollow something or another. And then the Jesse James Park or something.
They actually have a monument.
Yeah.
On the side of the road that the state of Tennessee put there.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that.
In honor of that family.
Oh, Jesse James.
Yeah. It's on the
on the side of the road.
Yeah, it's on the side of the road.
Then the burial spot must have been in the middle of the road when they put the road in.
No. It's buried on back from there. It was just a marker, kind of like these markers that they put out wherever they had a Civil War battle.
Oh, okay.
One of those type of markers.
Yeah, I like those big plaques.
Yeah, those big plaque markers. Yeah, I think they do that for historical purposes. Matter of fact, I think it's the
Historical Society.
The Historical Society that does a lot of that.
Okay.
Just like the Trail of Tears.
Right. Yeah, I've seen a lot of those markers.
Yes.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yes. These are events that happened during the time that it happened in, pertaining to this particular event.
Yeah.
Pertaining to this particular person.